I think the Fed actually delivered a much more dovish cut than the market was expecting. Folks, if you remember yesterday, we rattled off big banks like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman, and the like, all calling for a hawkish cut. The market seemed to be set up for a hawkish cut. And I don't think there is any question that the Fed delivered a more dovish cut. And frankly, I think has set us up for some surprises in the six. So let's go over what the Fed did, what the Fed said, what's it all mean. We have some earnings from Oracle. We have some data from some economists. And again, it's 7 a.m. That means it must be Thursday. Folks, normally on the daily financial news, we go live 7:30. Although on Thursdays, we go at 7 a.m. because one of our millionaire guests needs to talk at 7:30. So we make an exception on Thursdays. So what happened? Well, first and foremost, the Fed delivered the cut that the market expected. I will take a L. I will take a swing and a miss like I always do. I have this shirt, although it's a little cold this morning, so I'm not wearing it. So I swing and a miss. I was wrong. Unlike lots of content creators, I have no problem being wrong. I admit it and I move on. So the Fed cut 25 basis points. I was a little surprised that we only had 3 dissents. Now we had Jeffrey Schmid and Austin Goolsbee say that we should not cut. And of course, we had Fed President Moran say we should go 50. Although if you look at the dot plot, I think there is a different story. If you look at the dot plot, there were actually 6, yes, folks, 6 Fed presidents who said no cut was their desired approach, at least going into the meeting. If you don't know how the dot plots are handled, the dot plots are done days in advance. And then obviously at the Fed meeting, they vote at the end of the day. So clearly 4 Fed presidents were persuaded by Jerome Powell to approve a cut. I thought we would get 4, maybe even 5 dissents, but we only got 3. That is still the most divided Fed since 2019. And here's the deal. I don't think it gets better next year. More on that in a minute. So again, 3 dissents, 2 for a pause, 1 for a cut of 50. Now, what about next year? The dot plot. The dot plot has 7 Fed presidents, 7 voting for no cuts, 0 cuts in 2026. I don't know about you folks, but I think that is highly, highly unlikely. I think what we had today or what we had yesterday was the last cut until we cut for bad reasons. What do I mean by that? Well, there's one thing to cut and tinker and all of those things with the Fed's funds rates. And then there's another reason to cut because you are scared, nervous, or something is falling apart. I think yesterday was the last cut because of insurance, right? Trying to protect the system. The next cut will be because something broke. And I think it might break pretty quickly. On top of that, we have the Fed, as expected. This one I got right. The Fed is now buying $40 billion in treasuries out to 3 years. This is, some people could call this QE. I don't really call it QE. I think in order to call it QE, you've got to get duration. You got to go out to the 10-year. When you start doing yield control and things of that nature, you can start thinking that there is true QE. But here's the deal. They're starting $40 billion. Will that increase? Will they quietly extend duration? We shall see. Powell did blame tariffs for inflation, basically saying inflation wouldn't be where it is today without tariffs. Powell did talk about housing, obviously a topic that's near and dear to my heart, to your heart. Powell said things like, housing supply is low. People bought and refied at low rates. We haven't built enough. We need more housing. And finally, the Fed cannot impact shortages of supply. Again, Powell clearly putting this on someone else. However, it is interesting that he did not say, whoops, we bought mortgage-backed securities for too long. We bought too many of them. We, the Fed, forced rates low. No ownership of that, but hey, it is what it is. Weekly unemployment came in today, and as expected, we had a big adjustment from last week. Remember, last week was Thanksgiving. I think it came in at 196. Today it came in at 236. It's actually up 44,000, which means it came in at 192 last week. So again, we had the big comeuppance. It was expected to be 220, so we came in above that. But really, any data around Thanksgiving is going to be noisy. How much of this is just, California and Texas not reporting and reported this week? There is a lot of that. Although we should point out that continuing claims are down. Continuing claims are down. Remember, we were knocking on the door of 2 million. We now have 1.838. That is the lowest continuing claims since April. Now, there are two reasons that continuing claims could fall. One, people get jobs. Two, they burn through their unemployment. Now, based on the few articles I read this morning, most people are saying that people are finding work, which is what we should hope for. So again, we are in an environment where unemployment duration is the thing to watch. The reason that I think that Jerome Powell and the Fed were dovish is the final talking in front of the microphone. Powell said, we have only added 40,000 jobs per month since April. And then he dropped the hammer. Then he said, but due to overcounting, the actual number could be closer to negative 20,000. Folks, what Jerome Powell is saying is the data coming from the BLS is garbage, junk. It is off by 60,000. And in fact, we are shrinking. That is why the Fed approved a cut, in my opinion. And this is not a trend that you should like. This is a trend that could easily get worse. Historically speaking, unemployment takes the elevator up and the stairs down. And this is a problem. The QE, again, we talked about 40 billion in 3-year notes out to 3 years. I wonder what will happen next year, specifically until Powell is out in May. Will they extend duration? Folks, as soon as they go out to 10 years, that is QE. Did you know? Shout out Resi Club for this. And let's be clear, I did not know this. This is a housing stat that I did not know. In the last 70 years, the average variability of mortgage rates has been 1.4%. What does that mean? If you go from January 1st to December 31st of any year, the average variability is 1.4. So think from 5% to 6.4. That is actually a lot more variability than I would have expected. Now, if you shorten that duration and you just look at 2001 to today, so roughly half the time, the variability gets smaller, 1.08. So basically from 5 to 6%. Now, why is this? Well, as it turns out, in the early 80s, some years, thanks to Paul Volcker, some years had a variability of 4% plus. So think about that. You have mortgage rates at one point of the year at 8%, and then you go to 12%. That would be a shock. That is some very quick mortgage changes. Pretty crazy. Again, will this be the last good cut? I think the answer is yes. Any future cuts are because something is breaking. We did get Oracle news. Looks like Oracle's taking it on the chin this morning, down something like 10% or something. Again, they missed on revenue, and they highlighted that they're going to have to drop an extra $15 billion on CapEx next year. That is quite the number. And a lot of people are worried about Oracle's debt level. I do want to shout out somebody for getting their next deal. Aaron, you did message me on Messenger, Facebook Messenger. I obviously don't check that very often. So this is about a month late. So Aaron, I apologize, but your card will be going out in the mail. All right, let's finish up strong. Toll Brothers reported this week. They beat on the top line, but missed on the bottom line. And they also reduced their forecast for 2026. This is what I expect builders, all builders, to do. They might have been targeting pace over profit in 25. In 26, that's not the case. They are going to slow down construction. They are going to lay off workers, and they are going to wait for the market to come back. Cisco Systems, a stock that was near and dear to my heart during the dot-com bubble, finally set an all-time high yesterday. Folks, that is 25 years of dead money. If you bought Cisco Systems at the peak, you did not make a single cent until yesterday. That is 25 years of get to join school, or if you are in school, we have an extra special guest on Sunday, Rob Abasola from Rawbelt. He is somebody that does short-term rentals the right way, Bigger Pockets fame. I need to add that. Matter of fact, I need to add that today. I need to add the Zoom link to school. Let me take that down so that you guys can go ahead and ask Rob questions. Rob will obviously be speaking at our Vegas event as well. I will let you know that I'm starting to spend the big money. I just sent 50 grand for the event in food. And also want to let you know that tickets will stop on sale on January 15th. I need to lock in things, and it takes about a month so I can lock in things, get chairs, get all the goodies going. And I want to make sure everybody is treated well. So ticket sales will stop on January 15th. Again, if you want to get your tickets, go to Eventbrite. There'll be a link in the description. Less than 100 tickets. I think we still have 4 or 5 teenager tickets, free teenager tickets. Let me know. And we hope to see you all in Vegas. Get your tickets. Vegas is on sale. Flights, hotels, the like. Goldman Sachs had a report that I have a hard time believing. Goldman Sachs said 40% of households that make $300K are living paycheck to paycheck. $300K paycheck to paycheck, like roughly half. Folks, you do not have an income problem. You have a spending problem. That is what's going on. Read an interesting report from an economist, Anna Wong. Follow her on X or Twitter. She's actually saying that in 2026, so right around the corner, that her forward-looking data is showing renewed disinflation. Interesting. Thinks that the core CPI is trending down in mid-2026, next year. And the Fed will cut more often than expected next year. I actually agree with all of that. I think 2026 is going to surprise a lot of people. I think inflation will be finally go lower. Why? Shelter. Folks, we've been correcting for the shelter issue for well over a year now. If the Fed would get off their ass and use actuals, there's this 12-month rolling nonsense, inflation would be sub 2% today. It's just math, and it's not even particularly hard math. But yes, interesting. I guess lastly, it is Thursday, so we can talk about we already did the unemployment, 236. Let's just finish with the dot plot. Again, the dot plot says many of them say no cuts in 26. The average is 1. Unemployment's in a peak at 4.5. I think that's interesting, and I think that's going to prove to be low. I think there's a chance that unemployment's over 4.5 in Q1. So again, we will see that. And they did update their growth forecast, or AKA GDP. Their GDP forecast for 2026 went higher by a half a point, quite significant, from 1.8 to 2.3. All righty, folks, that is the daily financial news. We will be back Sunday morning at 7:30. Don't forget, if you are a landlord, to check out Steadily, see if they can get you better rates, better coverage. And of course, join School, and you too could ask Rob Abasola some questions about short-term rentals. Get all the accountability groups, free education, all of that good stuff. Folks, take care of yourself. Have a wonderful day. Peace.